connected with deep ecological movement. So it's a great pleasure to be here and to meet Julia Butterfly-Hill, our special guest today. And I hope we will have a big audience and great impact from this conversation.
Yeah, about Julia in a moment. Now some introduction about our friends which help us to organize this meeting. We are happy to meet again. Welcome to the 67th meeting of the Club of Ecological Thought. We have been organized such meeting for 9 years and 4 months. This time, unusually, we welcome you in English, but maybe in the future also we will invite guests from abroad more and more often. Certainly next month in May, 11th of May, we invite you to the meeting with Professor Ladisław Miko, former Minister of Environment of the Czech Republic and currently Director of Department in the European Commission. Allow a short but warm thank to many people which help us in this activity of Club of Ecological Thought. Rysiek, maybe you can start.
Yes, it's time to express our thanks. First of all, we should thank to Górnośląsko-Zagłębiowska Metropolia, which is our sponsor, and University of Silesia. Górnośląska Zagłębiowska Metropolia. The persons who support us are Blanka Romanowska and Justyna Jakubowska. And the next University of Silesia, it gives us technical support and organizational support. The persons are Martyna Folta, Radosław Aksamit, Piotr Kaszuba. And finally, our team, Basia Wojtaszek, Mira Jankowiak, Asia Ripel. Thanks for Asia Hetman, sorry. Thanks for your support and for your work to this project.
Yes, and above all, we thank you for being with us today, this evening. In May, will be published an article in the National Geographic about our club, and the title is meaningful title: "Change the World for the Better." This is our mission and dream, my and your, Rysiek, and of our club. I think it's also mission which is realized by our guest, Julia Butterfly-Hill. Our guest is Julia Butterfly-Hill. Big applause to Julia that you are with us. I am really, really happy. One of my dreams is coming true now. When in late 90s, I read about Julia Butterfly-Hill on the first pages of Polish daily newspapers, and I have such dream. It will be fantastic to meet, to talk with Julia somewhere in the future. And now, my dream
came true.
Came true, yeah. Let's introduce Julia to our guest, yeah. Rysiek, can you start? And Julia, you...
Yeah, of course.
You listen to us and later say if it's true or everything or something wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Julia Butterfly-Hill. Yeah, Julia Butterfly-Hill. You are an activist, environmental activist. well known from defending all redwood tree. You spent over 2 years living on the top of the tree. You are also a writer. You are an author. The book, The Legacy of Luna. The Luna is the name of the redwood tree. And co-author, One Makes the Difference. It's another book. You are co-writer. You are a subject of documentary Butterfly and Tree Seed, The Art of Resistance. You are motivational speaker, life coach, and travel a lot around the USA and other countries, as I heard. You are co-founder of the Circle of Life Foundation. So you do a lot in the environmental issues. Well, I have read you were jailed in Ecuador for protesting against oil pipeline. It was about 20 years ago. And you also became a proponent of tax redirection. So, Piotr, would you add something?
As far as I know, Julia spent 2 years and 8 days on this sequoia. So you are not right, Rysiek. And Julia appears in many films, in many songs. We are going to present one film with you and one song. Julia is also a poet. She writes poems. What else? Julia is the legend, the icon, of the environmental movement in USA. Well known in Polish because in Poland, deep ecology movement is quite strong, and what you represent is really deep ecological way of thinking, way of life. Was it the whole true about you? Can you say a few words to our guest to just starting our meeting?
Yes. Well, it's close enough. There's, at a certain point, the number of days I was in the tree just became, I didn't even know how many days I was in the tree. Someone else was keeping track of it, like we wouldn't know if someone else had kept track of it because I was so in the moment, which was one of the gifts of that experience. There was no way to survive it, but to be present with every moment. And that was a very big gift. And the other thing I would add is that I have done a lot for the environment. And because I see it all as connected, I've worked on every front imaginable. How we treat animals, how we treat our elders, how we treat our children. I've done a huge amount of work in the United States with children who are homeless or in foster care or in the juvenile system. I've worked in high security prisons to bring them tools on how to do anger management through the way nature interacts and using nature's wisdom to teach them tools. So I've done a lot of things, even though I'm known for this one action. When I was at the top of the tree, I truly saw how everything affects everything else. Whether we see it or not, every single choice affects everything else. And so when I came down from the tree, it was really just nonstop trying to help people realize that everything truly is interconnected, that it's not just a spiritual thought, it's also a scientific fact, and how to weave the heart and spirit and science all together has been my passion for a very long time.
Thank you very much.
Well, you do. Well, you do a lot, and you are a very busy person. But let's start our conversation with, let's say, grounding our being. I mean, we are in Poland. You are in USA. Would you tell us where are you exactly? What is a place? What can you see when you look outside the window? What is the weather? What is the time of the day? Say something about your here and now.
Okay. I'm currently in the San Francisco Bay Area on the east side of the bay in California. Many people know of San Francisco, so that's why we say that name, because the town I'm in, no one's ever heard of, but it's on the same bay that San Francisco, just on the other side. I'm actually currently at my sister's house. She is not my sister of birth, but she's the closest person I have in my life. She's an extraordinary human being. And I'm here taking care of her elderly cat, so she and her husband and child can visit their family. And when I look outside through the windows, I'm blessed to see trees. I've done a lot here with my sister to really bring as much nature into. She literally lives on a corner of two very busy streets. So it's a very loud and horns honking all the time, and it's craziness out there. So we did our best to create this little ecological oasis in the middle of the chaos. So that's where I am right now. And it's 10:16 in the morning.
Okay. So you start your day and we just finishing our.
Yes. It's so wild what this technology allows us to do. So much of technology, I feel, separates us, but these kinds of things allow us to connect in meaningful ways all over the world at different times. And my head still has a hard time understanding how it all works, but but it's great because now we get to have wishes come true via technology.
Yeah, it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe we will start with a short film which presents Julia from the past and from today, from the present activity also, just to present you in some actions. Okay, the title of the film is "Find Your Tree." It lasts about 3 minutes.
The towering sequoia, a giant of the redwoods, and the symbol of one woman's fight to save something for us all. Environmentalist Julia Butterfly Hill gained attention around the world when she spent more than 700 days atop this Luna tree. That was Hill a decade ago. This is her today, and we found her still inspired to change the world. So what inspires you?
Everyday people who recognize that their lives can be a gift to others. That inspires me.
Now she's giving others the tools to change the world too.
What's Your Tree is literally designed for anyone, anywhere who cares about the world and wants to make a difference.
What's Your Tree is a program founded by Hill's nonprofit organization, Circle of Life. It's also connected with the newly formed nonprofit Engage Network. How did you come up with the name?
We came up with the name What's Your Tree because of the amount of times that people have come up to me and said, Julia, what you did was so amazing. I could never live in a tree for 2 years. And I always tell them, well, neither could have I, right? It's not something that you plan. Your heart calls you into action and you follow it.
What's Your Tree groups are popping up across the country to help people do 3 things. 1, find a sense of purpose.
What's your tree is what I always tell people. Maybe it's not a redwood or a Douglas fir, but it's symbolic. What is it in your life that could have you be more powerful than you know yourself to be? That could have you be in service in a way that has you so inspired in what you're doing that you can't help but make a difference.
2, connect with community.
We feel like we're a part of something, that we don't just have to do it on ourselves.
And 3, take inspired action.
And they might choose an actual tree, or it might be choosing to teach children who are considered at risk, or it might be working to create a community garden. It can take any form.
Her message? Ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
People know me as this woman who lived in a tree for 2 years. They know me as this public figure. They don't know that I'm just another human being like anyone else. And when I stood at the base of that over 1,000-year-old redwood, and I was looking up to the top over 200 feet away, and I knew that I wanted to do something, and I climbed up. I didn't know how to be an activist. I didn't know what it was going to take from me for those next 2 years. I just knew I wanted to help. These redwoods are disappearing. We won't ever get them back. I want to do something.
I love Julia Butterfly Hill. She's such an inspiration.
Gerald Perlman founded Organic Style magazine, and he's one of Hill's biggest fans.
We are honored to have Julia Butterfly Hill on the cover of Organic Style magazine because she is such an inspiration to so many people. I admire her so much because she stands up for what she believes in. She's passionate and committed and would stop at nothing for a higher purpose. And she's inspired millions of people around the world to also stand up for what they believe in. And that's what we need today.
As one person, we can make a huge difference. When we bring our individual talents and gifts together, we create miracles.
I have a first question to you, Julia, about your protest connected with this sequoia. You spent on a tree, sequoia, for 738 days in an act of civil disobedience to prevent clear cutting of ecologically significant forest. Could you tell us about these 2 years living on sequoia, about your solitude spent on this red tree? Have you felt abandoned by people during this time? How did you deal with the possibly life threats, those storm and heavy rain and many other things, as I know? How did you find the strength to endure to the end? And finally, do you consider your action was a success? Please tell to Polish people about this unique event in your life. I mean, also in ecological movement for us, because it was unique.
Thank you. Well, when I first went up, I thought I was going to be there 3 weeks to a month, not 2 years and 8 days. So it's a much different thing that ended up happening than what I first thought was going to happen. But how that came about is that after I had been up there for a while, I'm a huge introvert, which people don't realize because I became public and I do things like this, but left to my own nature, you won't hear from me or see me for months on end. And so part of the reason I volunteered to do a tree sit was that because it was in my nature to be out in nature and to not have people around me. And I grew up extremely poor with very little. There were 5 of us living in a camping trailer, a very small camping trailer. So living in a very small space up in a tree with very little fit my experience. It wasn't like a stretch for me, you know. Some people who become active in the environmental movement, they come from a middle or upper class family. So they have a different approach. But because I grew up so poor with so little, it was not like figuring out how to do that. It wasn't that it was easy, but it also wasn't difficult because I was already designed to do something like that. But then when I was up there, I was thinking, well, you know, I'm just doing this tree sit and it'll get the media to talk about it. And then I'll come down and figure out what I meant to do next, because I didn't want to be in the media. I had no desire to be in the media. But then the trees started telling me, Julia, we need you to be our translator. And I was like, what do you mean? You know, like you need a translator. And when people say, well, what does it sound like when nature communicates with you? In the beginning, I tried to explain it. And then I realized I was explaining it all wrong, that when nature communicates with me, it's not a sound from the outside in. It's an experience and a knowledge from the inside that comes out. That's how I experience communication with the natural world. And so the trees told me, Julia, nature has been communicating since the beginning of time, but unfortunately people have forgotten how to listen. And just like if you go to another country or speak in another country, you need a translator, just like we do in this event. Nature needs translators because people don't understand us anymore. And it told me very clearly, you understand us, Julia, and so you have to become the translator. And I was like, but I don't want to. And nature was like, it doesn't matter. If you want to help, this is your calling, whether you want it or not. And so I said yes. I explain it to people as the choiceless choice. When we come to these moments where we could choose to walk away or to be silent about something, but our heart, our spirit, our soul compels us to say yes. Even if, like with me, being introvert and shy, I wanted to say no, I couldn't. I had that choice, but my soul, my heart, and my spirit said, you have to say yes, even if this is not what you really want to do. So I said yes to that calling, and then that's what led me to 2 years and 8 days. I never knew when the end was going to come. I just told everyone, I'm not coming down until I've done everything I possibly can. And I don't know what that is, but I will know. But I'm not going to come down until I've done everything I can, because when the chainsaws are coming, the trees can't get up and run away. And so in order for me to make that connection in people's minds who don't pay attention to nature, don't think about our relationship with this, I had to put my body in the same position as the trees. That was the most effective way for me to help people relate to what was happening. And then I was able to come down 2 years and 8 days later because we negotiated an agreement with the company that permanently protects the tree that I was in and the grove around it. It is a law that goes with the land. And in the United States, it's the highest form of law protection we have. Although, as we know, laws mean nothing. Laws mean how much we need to be paying attention or not, because laws change all the time. But in the United States, there's a law that it's called running with the land instead of with a person or a company. So this law is connected to the tree Luna and the grove around Luna forever. So no matter who owns it, the land owns that law, and so it can't be changed by a company or a person. And so I was able to come down because we had done it, which had never been done before. And we were all shocked, myself included. You know, I thought I might die up there. I came close to dying many times, but that's why I was able to come down. I didn't really feel abandoned by people, in part because I'm an introvert. But one of the hard things was, for me, experiencing all the infighting that happened amongst the activists. And it really made me sad. And I had some really deep moments of deep despair and wanting to give up and come down, because I thought, if this is the best we have to offer, we have nothing. This one day this was before cell phones and all this technology, you know, so it was a different world back then. I mean, I had a cell phone, but it was like this big and it couldn't communicate with the world. You know, it was a very basic phone back then. And we were having a meeting about an action with the activists on the ground. And because we had different opinions of what should be done and how it should be done, people started fighting and arguing. And it got really bad. And so when I hung up the phone, I literally was crying. And I was like, I was climbing around on the Luna because Luna was, you know, my nurturer. And I was just sobbing. And then I was seeing, because I could see for miles in every direction, I could see beautiful forests, destroyed clear cuts, beautiful forests, destroyed clear cuts. And as I was watching it, the knowledge came to me, how can we be effective at stopping the clear cutting of the forest if we're so effective at clear cutting one another? And that was the moment I switched from being only about the redwoods to really being a deep ecology person, to thinking about, it's not just about changing the world, it's about changing the world through how we show up for it. You know, we so much want to change others' behaviors and other people's thinking and all of that. And yet we don't realize that the biggest change comes from within, especially the biggest lasting change comes from within. So that's really what made a big difference for me in what I was talking about, how I was communicating, how I chose to start living my life and have ever since. That was kind of a pivotal point for me, a very powerful point. And as far as do I think I made the difference or not, the interesting thing is I've made a difference in a lot of areas I never imagined, which is why I tell people, you never know the ripples, you throw the stone in the water and the ripples go out. In our lives, we don't see oftentimes how far those ripples that go out. Sometimes just being kind to someone who we don't even realize has had a hard day ripples out into how they treat their family when they get home. There's so many ways the way that we behave can have ripples that we will never see and never know, but it doesn't mean that they're not happening. And so it was interesting because, I've had letters from people who were alcoholics who said they were able to overcome alcoholism as a disease because when I was up in the tree and they heard that I was going through the storms and the company trying to kill me and all of those things. And they said, if that young woman can do that, then I can overcome my alcoholism. I had another woman who had been the doctors had given her a diagnosis of terminal cancer and told that she needed to get her life in order, that she probably had about 6 months to live. I ended up meeting her after I came down and she was in remission, and it had been a year and a half since the 6 month mark. So she was 2 years after being told she had 6 months to live, and she was in complete remission because again, she was listening to me on the radio through the winter and the storms and all those things. And at first she had given up because the doctors told her to give up. And then when listening to me talking about what I was learning and experiencing and going through, she too just changed her mindset and said, I might die, but until that point, I'm going to give everything I have to living instead of everything I have to dying, which is what they told me to do. And she went into remission and lived. So the ripples were so much bigger than what I imagined. But also beyond that, I tell people that because no choice happens in a vacuum, it's actually scientifically impossible to make no difference. It's impossible. Like scientifically, we cannot make no difference. We cannot have no impact. Every single choice we make, every thought we think affects something else. And the challenge is that industrialized countries, we don't often see where something comes from and then where it goes. And so we don't really realize how powerful our choices are. But it is spiritually impossible to make no difference, but it is also scientifically impossible to make no difference. So what I tell people is that don't be attached to the outcome, because if you are, you're going to be miserable. I'm known for something I succeeded at. I've given everything I have to many other campaigns, some of which we've lost. And if I had the chance, I would go back and do it again, because I know that it was important for my voice and my body in that moment to stand up for justice, even if we lost, to stand up for love and care, even if we lost. So for me, that's really important, because we're going to lose some, we're going to win some. And if we're attached to either, we won't show up as our full and present self. That's what leads to burnout. Especially when people have a big success like I did, and then you experience a failure, a lot of times people will give up because they're attached to that big success, and that failure makes them feel so depleted that they give up. And so I just say, I want to offer my life in service, because what else would I want to do with my life? That's what I want to do with my life. And however that shows up, I'm going to show up with my best. And some days it's going to be great, and some days it's going to be awful. But every day I'm just going to show up and say, what can I do with my life today to make the world a better place? And that's how I live my life. And does it hurt when we lose? Of course it does, because I do what I do from my heart, which means that if we're taking action from our heart, then it's going to hurt when we lose things we care about, whether it's the environment or communities or animals, whatever, it's going to hurt. But at the same time, love is where our strength comes from. And then we just get up and offer love again the next day and see where it takes us.
Thank you, Julia. Do you have a question concerning Luna still, Rysiek? I have one more, but maybe you know.
Yes. I don't know, but well, I would ask also about Luna. Do you have the relationship with Luna still alive, or is it just do you meet or not now?
Yes, on occasion I go up to visit Luna. I've experienced so many injuries, physical injuries, and Luna is at the very top of a very steep mountain. So even though I now have the right with the logging company to be able to use the logging road to get up most of the way, because that whole top area is protected, you can't drive all the way, nor would I want to. But the last 30 minutes of the hike is extraordinarily steep and had so many injuries that for many, many years, and when my Lyme disease was very bad and I could barely walk, let alone do anything else, I couldn't go to see Luna. But when I go, it's more about giving energy to that place. Native American communities that I've worked with have, and in other indigenous communities I've worked with have said, we receive spiritual energy from these places in part because we minister to them. We bring offerings to them. We say prayers of gratitude to them. And so many people think about, well, nature's beautiful, what's in it for me? But people who are really connected to a place ask themselves, well, what can I bring to the land? What can I bring to this place? So when I've gone up there, it's more about just bringing myself as an offering of gratitude to Luna and to the grove and to the mountainside, to the community below. For many years, if I couldn't get all the way up, I would just stop. When I was up there doing activism and things, I would stop on the side of the road where Luna's up on the mountaintop and sing songs of gratitude and prayer, and then continue on. As for me, though, there's no way to go through an experience like that and not have Luna be a part of me for the rest of my life. You know, like there's no way to go through that deep and profound and intense of an experience and not have that extraordinary elder tree in me, teaching me, guiding me every single day.
Mm-hmm. Piotr?
Maybe about similar situation in Poland now. The occupation of Luna drew the attention of the public to the problem of cutting down natural forest. This begs the question, what methods of defending trees have the real effect? Currently in Poland, in the Carpathian forest, in Bieszczady Mountains in Poland, there is a slightly similar protest to yours. A few or dozen people, they live on platforms suspended on trees, make it impossible to cut down all trees. Rysiek and Basia, they spent few days in this Carpathian forest with these people. My question is, what could you tell them, advise them to persevere? Probably they listen to you now, because in some way they do the same as you. They live on trees now, try to preserve the most valuable forest in our mountains in Poland.
Right.
Rysiek, could you add something about this situation in Poland now?
Yeah. Well, now there is no logging in this forest because of the presence of the activists, but they still there to protect this natural place. The name of the group is She Wolves. She Wolves. There are men and women, but the name is She Wolves. So what would you tell? What would you advise to She Wolves group?
Well, the first thing I would say is thank you. How do you say that in your language? How do you say thank you?
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję?
Dziękuję. Great.
Dziękuję. So I would first say dziękuję because oftentimes people don't realize how difficult it is to do direct action. Like a lot of people will do it for a day or two, and it's a really intense but powerful and empowering experience. But for people who stay and stay and stay, it's really difficult. Or if you're doing an action on a day where you're risking getting arrested by the police, or all, so many things that can happen in the United States. You can get shot for being an activist and killed, and they don't even care. So I would say that thank you first, just because the greatest changes in history and herstory, as I call it, have happened when people are willing to put their bodies where their beliefs are. And so that's a profound act of courage and love, and I'm grateful for that. The second thing I would say is that, different actions have different effects all over the world. If I had been in South America, like I've done activism in Brazil and Ecuador and these kinds of places, and if I had done a tree sit in one of those places, they would have cut the tree down out from underneath me and killed me before I'd been up there long enough to even become like a martyr for the movement. They would have killed me before people even knew about me. So different places require different kinds of activism, different kinds of actions, and different approaches to those actions. And so it's not for me to say what's best for these places. In all the places that I've been, I try to go learn from the people, learn what the strengths are, what the missing pieces might be. I come from a more holistic approach. One thing I know for sure is that even when things are very intense and the forces against us can literally be evil, like they hovered a twin propeller helicopter right above my head. That thing has 350 miles an hour updraft underneath that. That is like strong hurricane, tornado type winds right above me. And they were so close to me that I could see the eyes of the pilots, and they were pointing at me and laughing. Like they were trying to kill me and thought it was funny. And so sometimes we will come up against those forces. But what I've learned is it's okay to be angry. I tell people if we're not angry at the world today, we're probably not awake. There's a lot wrong. And if we love something, then anger is a natural response. But then we have to go internally and shift that anger back to what I call fierce compassion. There's still passion in it. It's still fierce, but instead of coming from a place of hatred and anger, it's still coming from a place of love. Am I angry at the corrupt governments and destructive corporations? Of course I am. But the reason I'm angry at them is because I have a deep and profound love for this earth and for all the diversity that it holds. That's really why I'm angry. I'm not the anger at them we project thinking it's all about them. But what's underneath that anger is my deep love. And that is the only thing that can help sustain us through the difficult times, keep us from burning out. In my work and trainings with activists all over the world, I've done a whole lot of that because it's so easy in the intensity of moments that if we don't keep doing the internal work, then we start becoming destructive towards one another. And so for me, the internal work is as important as the external work. So anytime I'm doing any action at all, I'm looking at it as a circular action, not just an action out. So I'm looking at it as a circular action. So as I'm doing this work out, I'm constantly reviewing, feeling, sensing, seeing what's working, what's not, trying to figure out why, doing the internal work to see, did I just come from a place of judgment and anger, or did I actually come from a place of love? And it's a fine line, Sometimes I can be like, I'm doing this because I love, but then I'm all self-righteous and talking to people like I know more than them. And that's actually judgment. That's not love. And sometimes they can look the same, but they're not. So that's the thing that I believe, in my experience anyway, is important no matter where we're doing our actions, that personal internal ecology work is as equally important as the external ecology work, and that we find ways to make being connected more important than being right. Because my experience in a lot of actions is we're so committed to being right, and we are right, but why are we not further along in our world? If right was all it took, we wouldn't have to work near as hard to defend the things we love. And right isn't what it takes. Connection is what it takes. It is the disconnection from the earth that's causing us to destroy it. And so if we're trying to stop people who are trying to destroy the earth that they feel no connection to, if all we do is judge them and make them more angry and make them wrong and all of that, they're going to be more connected to their destructive behavior than to their thoughtful behavior. So my experience, at least thus far, teaches me that no matter where we are in the world, even if our actions might look very different, how we're approaching them is a really, really key importance no matter where we are.
Yeah, Rysiek, maybe it's time for song, yeah? For song. We are going to present a song about Julia and Luna. The title of this song is Hill, Are You Up There Still? The singer is Jessie Manzanita Wallace. Could you say anything about this song, Julia?
Yes, it's actually two women who are partners, and they're wonderful. They live in a cabin out in the woods. And you have to understand, when they did this song, it was before we have all the technology we have now. It was 21 years ago, maybe a little longer when they did this song. So they had just a little bit of equipment in their living room, and they put the song together in the studio in their living room. And now you kind of can have a studio with a computer and all kinds of things. But back then, that was not the case. It was very, very different. People forget this, you know. It wasn't that long ago that my cell phone was this big instead of like this big. But they wanted to help, and because they're musicians, they felt like, well, one of the things they could do to help is to create a song and share that song in order to help share the message. So that was one of the ways they contributed to our efforts. And the beautiful thing about creativity is that oftentimes it can extend beyond language barriers, because with music, we can oftentimes, or with a painting or anything like that, we can have a feeling even if we don't completely understand what it's saying or what it's supposed to look like. It can create a feeling in us. And that is such an important part of our lives and of the world. So that was what they wanted to do, was to create a feeling that helped people connect to what we were doing for the forests. And they just used my story because it was a very big story that was going around the world. And so it was a story that was also connecting people from around the world. So that's the story behind the song.
Thank you. Let's listen. Julia Butterfly Hill, are you up there still?
Julia Butterfly Hill, are you up there still? Are you up there still? Yeah, Julia Butterfly Hill, by your strength and will, a vision to fulfill. Yeah, in the year of the El Nino, 1998, to the fury of the fiercest winter storm and the chopper's force, she clung high up there to her conviction that ancient redwood trees are not a renewable resource. Julia Butterfly Hill, are you up there still? Vision to fulfill, yeah. Julia Butterfly Hill, are you up there still? By your strength and will, yeah. The TV news took their camera crews down to Scotia Town to interview some people on the streets there. They say, go ahead and cut it down. Cut it down. If she gets hurt or killed, we don't care. Julia Butterfly Hill, I guess they just can't see the forest for the tree. Yeah. Julia Butterfly Hill, it's more than I could do. I look up to you, yeah. Now Julia Lorraine Hill will always be remembered in folk history and song for climbing up into Luna's branches and staying there so long. Now we can hope and we can pray that someday the ancient trees will still be here to drink the morning mist in the fern-filled glade, and they can stand and they can face the golden sunrise instead of a chainsaw blade. Julia Butterfly Hill, are you up there still? A vision to fulfill, yeah. Julia Butterfly Hill, it's more than I could do, and I look up to you, yeah. Julia Butterfly Hill, I can see you up there shining, and all the trees are smiling. Julia Butterfly Hill, the moon shines her light on me. I know that butterflies are free. Butterfly Hill, are you up there still?
Yeah, we hope that you enjoy this song about Julia and Luna. Rysiek, you have another question.
I enjoy the song very much. It's really beautiful. And I'd like to return once more to Luna times in your life. This experience defined you. I mean, your identity. You were a young person, young girl, and defined how do you perceived by other people. So in this perspective you have now, how do you see this process, and do you feel convenient with this identity, and every person should or just ask you about Luna times and you talk about it on, and how do you see this process during your life?
Yes, it's been really challenging on many levels, of course, because part of the reason is I had this profound and 2-year experience that was so completely different than most people my age were having at the time, so in certain ways I didn't develop at all because I wasn't having those kind of on the ground social interactions that many young people my age have. But at the other end of the spectrum, I was living with an over 1,000-year-old elder who was sharing her wisdom with me day after day after day. So another part of me was like growing really, really fast. And then also, I never even owned a TV, and all of a sudden I was having to deal with media, and I was having to learn how to organize, and all these things I had to learn that I never knew how to do before I went up there. I had no experience in much of this. So I was also having to go to a version of self-taught school at the same time I'm experiencing. So I wasn't just in a classroom learning and then going out into life and applying it. I was doing both at the exact same time, So it was like learning as I went kind of thing. And it's been interesting because as an introvert and a shy person, it's actually been harder for me to be public Julia Butterfly, actually, than it was to go through all the difficult things I went through in the tree. The company trying to kill me, people trying to kill me, and trying to starve me down, all these different things that happened. Although those were very, very hard in the moment, they were more in my nature than being a public person. And so being a public person for all these years has actually been much, much more difficult on me. And part of my own personal journey and challenge is to not get stuck in that particular view of me. It is absolutely a part of me. And at the same time, my goal is to take what I learned, apply it in this moment, and see if it teaches me something new. Like, not just have it be this thing I learned 20 years ago and have it be that exact same thing for the rest of my life, but rather to take the learnings, apply them, see if I learn something new, then apply that. You know, it only is healthy if it stays alive. In nature, anywhere something is stagnant, it's dying. If there's not, you know, movement in a lake, the oxygen goes away and the life in the lake dies. And if you have a monoculture farm, it's a stale, it's not a moving thing, it's not a diverse thing. And so it too is very susceptible to disease or fire or all those kinds of things. A permaculture farm that has a lot of movement and diversity, that's healthy. So nature's wisdom teaches us that to be stagnant means to die. And it's only through the movement, the energy, the diversity that not only does life happen, but also beauty happens. And so my kind of dance has been how to allow that part of me to still be here, but also allow myself to grow and become who I'm meant to become. And for a long time, it was very hard because I felt so responsible, because I did gain so much attention and energy around the world that I could use that attention and energy to help people, to help causes, to support organizations like yours. Like, it allowed me to do so much more than I ever could have imagined being able to do in my life. And so I felt responsible to that, and not necessarily in a negative way, but just because my heart is so huge and caring. Sometimes it's very difficult to have the heart that I have, because everything I feel like it's happening to me. If I see nature being destroyed, I feel like I'm being destroyed. If I see an animal being hurt, I feel like I'm being hurt. Like, I'm that kind of person. I feel things very, very deeply. And so because I now all of a sudden had all this power and privilege from what had happened, my heart longed to help all these things that needed my help. But at the same time, my personal ecology started to die because I wasn't taking enough time. You know, there's a waxing and a waning of the moon. There's the in and the out of the tide. Like, everything in nature has its, vitality time, and then its energy returning in. And I was just giving out until I had nothing left. So it's been a blessing and a challenge. And right now, I actually have been in my winter time where I'm not doing hardly anything at all in the world, because I did so much for so long. And because I'm famous for being an activist, everyone needs my help, but all the communities I'm helping, they don't have a lot of money, because if they did, they would just use the money to protect what it is they're trying to protect, you know? And so a huge amount of what I did for 20 years was for free or very little. And I don't have some rich sponsor paying for me. I don't have, a job that pays me regularly. And so my financial ecology as well suffered. And that's what we, to live in the world today, whether we like it or not, the financial ecology, I call it green energy, is a part of, how we thrive. And so I had to step back and take time for me, because there's more of me that wants to be expressed and wants to try new things and wants to see who I am now. And there was no space or time for that, because I was so busy being Julia Butterfly. But the beauty is like, that part of me is still to this day supporting so many people in their growth, in their own healing, in their finding their courage to be in service in the world. And so talking about that part of my experience, I don't ever get tired of. Like, I don't talk about the how the basics of how I lived up there anymore. Like a lot of people, especially in the US, are like, they want to talk about the basics. And I'm like, no, I did not risk my life for 2 years to talk about like how I made my food and what did I sleep on and stuff like that. Like I'm done with that part of the conversation. But talking about the challenges, talking about what I learned, talking about what I've learned from that learning sense, those things are continuing to help so many people. And my heart loves that opportunity to support other people, because I think a lot of times, like after I came down from Luna in the United States, I actually spent a lot of time in the middle of the country. And that's where the thinking in the United States is very, very different than on the coasts. On the East Coast and the West Coast, people tend to be more open-minded. They usually have traveled further, so they have a different awareness of the world. And in the South and Midwest, they've been raised on farms. They usually haven't even left the state to go to a different college. So their thinking is very different. And I actually spent a lot of my time in that section, whereas a lot of famous environmental authors and all of those things were going from one side to the other. My calling was to go into the heartland and try and bring my heart. And so, there's so many people that my story has reached who just needed to feel like they weren't alone in how they feel about the world, that they needed to feel like someone was going to stand with them, even if I couldn't be with them in person, that energetically I was going to stand with them when they took a hard stand in their community. And how blessed am I that I've been able to do that with my life. It's so humbling, like it brings tears to my eyes. I can't believe that that's something I've been able to do with my life. And at the same time, I'm still having to take a winter time from that, because there is an ongoing, never-ending need for me to be that person. And yet I'm a human being who has many parts that wants to express. And one of the things I love to do is cook plant-based foods. And so that's actually what I'm doing a lot of right now. Mm-hmm. I've been actually helping people with health challenges, severe health challenges, get healthier through plant-based eating and learning how to eat food as medicine. And that brings me joy and that makes a difference, but it's not as Julia Butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have a question concerning not Luna, modern society. Henry David Thoreau said, the society for which I was made does not exist. Sometimes I use this sentence, I know this sentence from Rysiek. Sometimes I use this sentence when I write a dedication for someone. Sometimes this thought pops into my mind. Do you have also these feelings? What do you think about modern society? Do you feel good in modern society, or you cry, you get anger when you think about today's modern society, our world beach in such maybe bad way?
I never felt like I belonged, honestly, from the time I was a little girl. I'm very, very, very different from my family of origin. So from the time I popped out, I felt like I was supposed to be somewhere else, And it is hard when we have these deep, passionate feelings that don't match up with the world around us. And I get depressed a lot. I get angry, I get frustrated. My biggest challenge my whole life is depression. I've struggled with very severe depression my entire life, including when I was a child. But what I try to do, and I don't always succeed, but what I try to do is turn that reflection back in and say, yeah, this is a terrible moment, but it's not going to change if I'm here and I'm not willing to try, if I'm not willing to bring something forth. And it's amazing. Like I've literally had people pull guns on me and get them to put the gun down and talk to me. I've been in so many, in Ecuador where I got arrested, the military police had their machine guns pointed at my head. I mean, I've been through some very intense experiences, and I don't always bring my best self, especially if I'm tired and worn out. And so that's part of why I also think it's important that we take the time to do personal restoration and personal healing work, because I want to bring my healthiest self to the difficult situations. And so if all I do is focus on all the things I'm upset about and all the things I don't like, that's going to deplete me. It's going to completely deplete me, and I will go into depression and I will never come out. So sometimes I do take time to just go somewhere beautiful and experience it as beauty and not think about what might be threatening it or how horrible people can be to each other, to just absorb the beauty of that place and let it fill every cell in my being, so that when I do interact with these places that are, or experiences that are painful, that they don't take me all the way down. And I do remind people that even when we feel completely separate, whether we like it or not, we're not. We could wish we're separate from it, but we're not. We're right in the middle of it. And so we are a part of it, even if it feels so different from us and so painful to us, we're still a part of it. And so then I have to ask myself, well, what part of me can I bring to this that might make a difference? It might not, but it might. You know, throughout my life, I've had so many beautiful experiences, even traveling during this break that I've taken mostly from being Julia Butterfly. I've had the most extraordinary experiences with like people who also had lost their homes or had lost a loved one. And we're just chatting in a parking lot of a grocery store, and this profound, beautiful experience happens. And it's in the middle of an ugly city with strip malls, and all of a sudden magic and beauty happens. So that's just how I choose to approach it. I do struggle with depression, but I'm also committed that if we want it to change, then we have to be willing to show up with our best self and see if that can change it, versus always wanting someone else to change first.
Well, your approach is very psychological and spiritual. You are an advocate of the role of individual change, okay? And but there is a controversy in the ecological movement about this idea because many people think that we are not responsible. We are, as individuals, we are not responsible for the destruction of the environment. I mean, the most responsible are politicians, corporations, and big fish, and so on. So, how do you think? What is your comment to this controversy about this responsibility? And sometimes they point that corporation impose a sense of being guilty to individuals, and it's not okay. So what do you think about this feeling guilty about this condition of the environment?
Well, I don't believe in guilt.
What's your comment?
I don't believe in guilt because guilt doesn't create lasting change. It's not that guilt doesn't exist. I don't believe that guilt doesn't exist. It does exist. But when people make a change out of guilt, it doesn't last. Like the amount of times I've been at conferences and stuff, and someone's using a paper napkin, which I don't use, disposables, and they'll see me walk up and they'll be like, "Oh God, I'm sorry, I'm using a paper napkin. I feel so guilty." And I'm like, please don't feel guilty, because then you will never change your choices. So you could apologize to that tree and tell it that you love it, and then have that start to change your choices. But guilt isn't going to change it. Not long lasting anyway. We might change our behavior for a little bit, but love creates lasting change, not guilt. And I'm a both and. Absolutely, corporations and government officials and all these things are responsible in a very huge way. But if I'm not living my life in integrity, what right have I earned to tell them they need to change? We're constantly demanding that others change, but then we're not willing to change. Or we're not looking at our lives as an example for the kind of world we want to live in. And there's no such thing as a perfect choice. I wish there was, because it would be easier from someone like me. Clearly, I'm willing to go the distance and make the best choice I can make. So if there was a perfect choice, it would be easier for me. But even like in all the years that I was traveling all over the world and helping, my struggle was using fossil fuels and like, okay, am I causing more harm than the good I'm doing? And so I did start making some different choices based on like, how can I make this impact as little as possible, but recognizing I'm still making an impact. So in Ecuador, I was doing activism against oil companies, and at the same time, I'm using oil in my life, right? So that's an example of, although there's not a perfect choice, if I want to demand that these corrupt government officials and these corporations change their behavior, then I have to be constantly looking at myself and asking, how can I reduce the harm I'm causing and cause as much good as I possibly can? And the example I use is if you have plans to build a house, and you figured it all out, but you get the budget and it's going to be more than what you have money for, the one thing you don't change is the foundation of that house. You're not going to look at how to get a little bit of money cut off from the foundation because your whole house is going to crumble. You might change some decor or the amount of windows you have or something like that to reduce the budget, but you're not going to change the budget of the integrity of the structure of that house, which is the foundation. So if I want to demand that governments and corporations and individuals change, I have to be standing on a very solid set foundation, and that's what I'm responsible for.
Okay.
Yeah. We have still time, Irishek, before poems.
Probably last question.
Last question, yeah. So maybe about deep ecology, yeah? In one of your interviews, you said, "What I do is absolutely not my job, and I don't need to be distracted from it. If I were, I would be torn from myself, from earth, water, sand, and marble rocks. I want the action to last for the rest of my life. I have always dedicated my life to the greater good." For me, beautiful, so dear words to me. Me and Rysiek, we are associated with this philosophy, with this movement, so-called deep ecology. We belong to the Council of All Beings. Council of All Beings is based on deep ecology.
Right.
Are you close to deep ecology? What do you think about this way of thinking? It's the best way of thinking to heal the world, to repair the world, deep ecology? Because I'm asking because your protest on Sequoia was supported by Earth First, yeah? Deep ecology.
Yes and no. So Earth First started to treat it, but Earth First is a movement, and Earth First is very hard to talk about because it's not an organization. It's a movement, and there's no membership, and they say there's no hierarchy, even though in many places like where I got involved, there is a hierarchy. So it's full of contradictions, kind of like life is. But Earth First did start all the activism in the area where I got involved. But I chose to stay through the winter time, and no tree sit had ever gone through the winter time ever before in history in the United States. So there became kind of this struggle, not only about, is it safe for me to stay up there? Is it not? Is there resources? Is there not? There was also a challenge because all you have to do to say you're an Earth Firster is that you believe in no compromise in defense of Mother Earth. And for me, I'm about finding common ground as much as I can. And I can't always find it, but I'm going to try. And that belief system of no compromise leaves very little room to find common ground with people that are different than me. And I'm not saying they're wrong. They've made a huge difference. They shape things up so hard that it makes people pay attention. It'll get the media to show up when you have these really intense, hardcore activists. But when I had that aha in the tree about the wounds in the world and on the earth are the manifestation of the wounds that already exist within us. they're here first, and then we act it out on the earth, and we act it out on each other, then I really became more interested in communication, connection, how to change the story. Because when we change a story, we can start to change life. It's really all about a story. That's what we're doing right now. We're sharing stories. So there became a point where there was a really big conflict between myself and not all Earth Firsters, but kind of the movement as a whole decided that what I was saying and doing was wrong, and that I didn't represent them and all of those things. And I said, that's okay, because I was in the tree for quite a while before I even heard the word Earth First, because I came at the very end of the movement. I wasn't like educated into the movement the way most people are. And a guy who came up into the tree said something about Earth First. And I said, what's Earth First? And he was like, you're sitting in an Earth First tree sit, Julia. And I was like, oh. So I didn't really know that much about it. So to this day, it's like I still have friends who consider themselves very strongly Earth First, and I have people I know who consider them strongly as Earth First who do not like me, who will, any chance they get, speak negatively of me, and that's okay. That's diversity of life. But for me, it's just been like this deep ecology movement. What I had the aha in Luna, when Luna told me, and then trees told me, nature has been communicating since the beginning of time, and people have forgotten how to listen. What that taught me is deep ecology was as much a part of our body as our skin and our hair and our eyes and our blood and our lungs. If you look at the roots of trees underground, they look like the veins going through our body. Rivers look like the blood flowing. Like when you look at maps of actual nature and not cities, it looks like so much in our body and vice versa. So what the experience up there really taught me is deep ecology was who we are, and we forgot it. That's all. And so the work that you're doing and the work that many of us are doing is really just about trying to help people remember our true nature, the true nature of our human nature. It was always there. We've forgotten it, and now we're experiencing the consequences of that forgetfulness. And so your work and the work of myself and so many people around the world is to try and help people remember. Because once we remember, our thinking begins to shift. When our thinking begins to shift, our actions begin to change. And when our actions change in a more positive way, then so too does our world.
Yeah, it's a great message for us, for all the people nowadays.
Yeah.
Julia, you write poems, and you promised to read some of them. So it's the time to read it. And
I'm ready.
Let's switch off the light and light the candles. And
I'm sorry, it's daytime here, so a candle wouldn't show, but I'm lighting the internal candle of my heart and spirit as I share this. And I love that you all have rituals too. I think that's one of the things we need is this sense of ritual. For me, it's like when we experience something as sacred, it brings out a sense of awe. And that's part of what we've lost. Like to me, this movement is also a spiritual crisis, an emotional crisis, not just an environmental one. So I love that you have rituals like candles and connecting with where we are and what's happening where we are, that these rituals are as much a part of the work as, me living in a tree. Like this is all part of this change we wish to see in the world. So this poem is called Nature as Teacher. And I tell people that I don't write poems, poems write me. Because I'm not the kind of writer, even with my books, I had to work with other authors because I'm not like really a writer. I experience things and then they express, and that's just how I do it. So poetry has been a great way for me to express because it happens in little bits and I don't have to make it all fit into chapters in a book. I've had to have help with that. But when poems speak through me, if I don't write it down right away, it's gone. Like I literally can't remember it. So the whole time I was in Luna, I had these pants with pockets on the side, and I kept a little notebook and pen inside so that if a poem came to me, even if I was out on a branch on Luna, I would sit right there and write it. Because if I didn't, by the time I got back to my platform, it would literally be gone. So that's why poems write me. Now, this particular poem I wrote after I came. I'm sorry? What did you say?
Okay.
So this poem came to me actually after I came down from Luna because friends of mine were getting married and I wanted to offer them something. And then this poem, Nature is Teacher, came to me because relationships are hard. And nature gives us a lot of wisdom on how to deal with conflict, how to deal with diversity, how to merge together without losing our individuality. Like nature has so much wisdom for us any time of the day, but also when we're getting married. So that's the story behind Nature as Teacher. May the sun shine upon you, nurturing you both into beautiful growth. May the moon remind you that everything has waxing and waning. May the trees remind you to remain rooted in all that sustains you, and at the same time, to be flexible in the storms of life that will always come. Bend, don't break. May the flowers remind you to share and be beauty with and for one another. May the rocks remind you of our ancestors. May the animals remind you to be uniquely yourself, as they do not strive to be anything other than they are. May the stars remind you of magic and gems, the true wealth that is all around us all the time. May the water remind you that sometimes what seems soft can still wear away at the hardest stone. Remember to be soft with one another, especially when the other is being hard, and be a refreshment to one another. Oops, sorry. I'm reading this on my phone and I accidentally just lost the screen. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Technology is not always my friend. I'm pulling it back up. I was right in the middle of it and my big thumbs got in the way. My apologies. Okay. I should have printed this out, but I don't have a printer at the moment. That's why I didn't print it out. Let's see, where are we? Okay. May the water remind you that sometimes what seems soft can wear away at the hardest stone. Remember to be soft with one another, especially when the other is being hard, and be a refreshment to each other in times of need. May the forests and mountains remind you that we live on and with a sacred temple. May it source the sacred within you. May the cosmos remind you of how magical you are, even as it reminds us of how very small we also are. May this knowing of this dance between magic and dust inspire you to live big while remaining unattached to results and outcomes and humble at the experience of life. This makes the dance of life joyful and beautiful. May Gaia bless you with all you need to support you in your journeys together. So that is the poem that I accidentally messed up in the middle. I'm so sorry. That's life, right? Throws us curveballs.
Thank you very much for the words of wisdom. It was words of wisdom.
Nature gave them to me. I'm happy and honored to share them.
Okay,
Beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you. Basia, can you join us with the questions to Julia? So we're waiting for questions from the audience. Basia, hello.
Hello, good morning to Julia, and good evening. Yeah, good evening in Polish. Yes, so we have around 100 people watching us. A lot of comments expressing love, joy, and gratitude and respect to you, Julia. And also some questions, I think around 10. And as first, we have the question asked by the Metropolis, which is the first metropolis in Poland. How to protect trees against logging in those times of urbanization pressure in metropolitan areas?
That's unfortunately a really difficult one because, like here in the United States, basically they have complete autonomy. If they want to shoot you, they shoot you. If they want to tear gas you, they tear gas you. If they want to hit you with rubber bullets, they hit you with rubber bullets. Like, it's very, very dangerous here and in other countries sometimes to do this work. So a lot of what I've always tried to do is build allies between different groups. So like in the United States, certain unions are very big and very strong. And I helped build an alliance between a steelworkers union and the environmentalists. And people are like, but steelworkers are involved in extraction. What are you talking about? And I'm like, but if we don't realize that there's a common cause affecting us both, then we don't have the strength we need, because even though they're involved in jobs that are extracting resources, they work for corporations that don't care about them or the environment. Whereas if we had companies that cared about the earth, the environment, and people, then jobs would still be here, but they would be done in a more thoughtful and respectful way. Because right now what we're doing, we're losing the environment and we're losing jobs. And so building that alliance, when we had the massive protest to the WTO in Seattle in 1999, I think it was, huge protests around the world in Seattle, the World Trade Organization protests. The steelworkers surrounded people dressed in animal and environmental costumes with their steelworkers outfits on. And when the police came up to shoot the rubber bullets and the tear gas at the people dressed as turtles and things like that, when the police saw the steelworkers, many times they ended up backing off, because to hurt an environmentalist, they call us, eco-terrorists. They probably do something similar there. So when you're an eco-terrorist, then they have the right to do whatever they want to you. But when you have a big, 6'4" huge steelworker standing next to you with their steelworker union label on and everything, if that gets caught on camera, the police are going to get in a lot more trouble than if they just hurt an environmentalist. So anytime we're dealing with the intersection between the urban experience and the natural experience, for me, that's the most important time to find ways to build allies and to build relationships, especially amongst the people you wouldn't normally think you would have a bond with, and help create that bond. Because without it, it's a lot harder, because then the conversation is still environment versus progress, or environment versus jobs, which is it's a false story. But if we don't find a way to build relationships with people across the bridge, it helps that false story to continue. And then it makes the danger of doing that activism become higher.
Thank you
Did that
very
answer
much.
The question?
That was to me, it was like eyes opening. Yeah. Then we have a question from Aga Goleb, one of our fans on Facebook. How to deal with the anger that nature is being destroyed? How to manage our powerlessness?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not angry, you're not awake. Like any of us who are awake and who have feelings, we're angry, because everywhere we look, like you can spin in any direction and you're going to see something that is important and sacred being destroyed. But I have a few tools for that. One of the tools I have for that is I actually have a couple of friends who, if I need to vent and not be correct, not be spiritually correct, not be emotionally correct, like to just vent. You know, a storm is nature's venting. It's just like blowing until it gets itself all out and then it's calm again. And I know that if we don't find a healthy way to have our storms, then it comes out in unhealthy ways. It comes out in addiction, which I've dealt with in my life. It comes out in losing our temper at the very wrong time, and sometimes on the people we're closest to, because it's just built up inside of us, and our partner, our child says or does something, and we're so exhausted, and we release our storm on them. So one of my tools is I have a couple of people that I call and I say, do you have a moment? And that's actually our code for, do you have time and the energy for me to vent? And I'm not venting to be fixed. I'm not venting to find a solution. I'm not self-editing because I know I'm better. Of course I'm better, but I have all this energy moving around in my nervous system. And it needs to be stormy for a while so that it can move out of my nervous system, because when that energy is stuck, our anger gets worse and worse and worse. Our energy gets more and more heightened, and it's very hard to stay present. And physically, we burn out our adrenals. We do all these things that affect our personal ecology, which means we can't show up as healthy as we're designed to show up for the thing we care about. We show up with depletion, we show up with animosity. So these friends that I have, especially when I'm doing really intense stuff, I'll say, do you have a moment? And if they don't, they say, no, but tomorrow at such and such time I will. Or they say yes. And either way is totally fine. There's no expectation that they have to have a moment for me, but I have that for them as well. And when it's possible, they say yes. And then I just sit there and go off. Do you know what so-and-so did today? Or I'm so angry. I had this interaction with this person today and they were just so dumb. And it's like, of course, my enlightened self would not call someone dumb. It would see someone as on a learning path that they haven't learned that piece yet. But the other part of me that is human has a storm inside that needs to express. And so I will say things that I would never otherwise mean, but I have to get that pressure out of my system so that my storm doesn't explode in an unhealthy way. So that's actually one of the ways I've learned to deal with it, and it's made a huge difference. Another way I deal with it is I'll go out into nature somewhere and I'll ask Mother Nature if it's okay. I always ask her permission first. May I vent this energy onto you because I can't hold it anymore and I need something that can. And I have literally pounded on the ground, screaming and crying. I have thrown rocks. Like I've done all kinds of things. And if you saw me in the woods doing it, you'd be like, that girl is nuts. But it's moving that intensity out in me so that I can return to my center and bring my best self to the anger, to the pain, to the suffering, to the fear.
Thank you. Now is the question from a man, Konrados Tibet. I am a big fan of you, Julia. I read both your books. We share a birthday, and I even tried to drive to Oakland when I was living in the States. When anyone asks me a good example of something that was saved from destruction as a result of ecological direct action, I tell them about Julia, 2 years on a tree, and the tree is saved. Unfortunately, there are not so many examples. Many actions to protect some pieces of nature failed. What do you think or feel about having children? I recently came across a researcher investigating people who commit not to have kids because of environmental causes.
Yes, I actually knew from the time I was a very little girl that I would never have a child. My assumption was that I was going to adopt. I had a very abusive childhood, and it took me a long time to heal from what happened to me growing up. And so I was like, I don't ever want to bring another kid into this world. It's too violent, it's too mean, it's too horrible. So that was my thinking when I was younger. And then as my awareness grew, I knew that Mother Earth can only have so many children. You know, a woman's body is only designed to have so many babies before it starts to break down. The same thing with our Mother Earth. And especially because in industrialized countries, even when we're really thoughtful and conscious, usually one child equals at least two, if not more. Like they talk about places like India or Ethiopia where they're having a lot of children. But in places like that, they can have 8 children and it has the same ecological footprint as one from an industrialized country, you know? So it's about the children, but it's also about the consumption. So people who say, well, I'm not having a child, but then they use all that extra resources to just consume more, that's not the right choice either. But as I became older and aware of kind of the big picture, I chose consciously to not have children. I had surgery to ensure that it would not happen. And I never ended up adopting because my life got so busy. But in many ways, I've been able to help a lot more children because I've done so much volunteer work with homeless youth, youth in foster care, youth in the juvenile system who've made some bad choices. And if a positive influence doesn't come into their life, they're going to end up being a statistic in prison. And I can speak to them in a way that other people can't because I was a drug addict and an alcoholic and very self-destructive for a very long time because of what happened to me growing up. That was my way of self-medicating until I had other tools. Those were the only tools I had when I was 15. Now I'm 47, I have different tools. But you know, these kids are 15, 16, and 17, and they only have this many tools in the toolbox. And if they're not given a chance, they're going to jail and they'll probably stay in, they'll get out, they won't have any support, they'll end up back in. So I've been able to do a huge amount to support the children who are already here, which has brought me so much joy. And I'm a really great auntie to all these kids that aren't even my family. I'm an auntie to them. And I have very much a mothering instinct, but I choose to use it in different ways. And I don't ever want someone to feel shamed for bringing children into this world, because again, shame doesn't change anything. But I encourage people that take some of that energy and be a mentor to a kid out there who doesn't have a strong family, or they're a single parent who's working their butt off and don't have time they're doing everything they can to survive. They don't have time to help their child become the best child they can be. Be a mentor, be a big sister, be a big brother. I'm a huge advocate for adopting, but it does take specific tools within oneself to be able to go through that. So I'm like, if you don't have those skills, you don't necessarily need to adopt, but that doesn't mean you also need to have a child. There's all these other ways to be interacting with children and helping them. In the United States, the funding in schools is being cut left and right. There's so many opportunities. When I was a teenager, I volunteered in a school that had very little money and I taught art. And I went around to all the art supply stores and I asked them to give me whatever they couldn't sell. So sometimes it would be a tube of paint that had broken, but there was still good paint in it, or brushes that were too old to sell, or broken oil paintings or whatever. And I would gather it all in these bags and I would bring it back to my house and sort into piles of what to use and how to use it. And then I would take it to the school and I taught art lessons. And I'm not a skilled art teacher, but I love to express creatively. And I was working at a school. The reason it didn't have much money was because it was for high risk kids. They were kids who had been in the public school system, had failed for some reason, and had been sent to this school. So I was able to teach art, even though I'm not a professional, but I used it as a way to help them learn how to express what they were feeling and experiencing in a healthy way, so that they wouldn't end up back in the principal's office, because if they got kicked out of this school, there was no school left for them. That was the end of the line. So I was able to, yet again, work with kids and use something I love. It wasn't even something hard. The only hard part for me was going to the stores and asking them to help because I'm so shy. That was the hardest part. But showing up and teaching kids that art and creativity is not about perfection, it's about expression, and each person's expression is unique to themselves, and perfection gets in the way of expression. So to let that go, it was so meaningful, and I received so much nurturing like you would as a parent, but I was able to do it for 150 kids over a 3-year period. So those are I ask people to think, creatively, the many, many ways we can mother beyond just having a child. And then I tell people, if you're one of those women or parents who just has to have a child, then try to choose to just have one. And then use that extra energy to care for all, Mother Earth needs us, all of her children, the animals, the rocks, the water, the birds, the sky, all of us who are her children need our mothering too. So to take that extra mothering energy and find other ways to share and express it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Małgorzata Spyra asks, is there anything that particularly hurts and worries you about destructive actions of people on the environment, animals, or the poorest people? As for me, what hurts me most is when people torment animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, because I was abused severely as a child, that's part of what led to my activism too, is that there was no one to protect me. And so then I became this one who wanted to protect the ones who didn't have something to protect them, the animals, the trees, children. So that's really what formed my activism, was going without it as a child and experiencing the abuse and being unable to stop it. So my problem is, because I'm such a big empath, some people can go to like the factory farms and film what's happening to the animals. I can't do that. That's not my offering. I'm too empathic. I'm too sensitive. That would take me down. So I can't be in service in that way, because I know that that's not what my ecosystem can support. I just can't. And I have to be honest and real with myself, because if I did that, I would go in depression and despair and take myself off this planet in moments, because I would feel it too deeply. So I have all these other ways that I can help animals when they're being abused, whether it's an animal that's a pet or an animal that's meant for food or whatever. I've traveled in many poor countries where they don't have the same awareness and understanding. And so there'll be a bird on the beach and kids are throwing rocks at it and they think it's funny because they don't know any better. And in some situations, I'm able to find someone from the community to talk to them, because as an outsider, there's a time and a place. One of the things I learned in Luna is it's important to speak our truth, but it's also important to know when to do that. Because as an outsider white person in Mexico or Guatemala or any of the other places I've been, if they're tormenting an animal and I don't have a way to show up as a compassionate, kind neighbor, even if I'm a foreigner, they're just going to get mad at me, which means they'll torture the animals even more, because they're going to be like, who are you to say what I can and can't do in my own town, in my own country? And it actually makes them go closer to the thing I'm actually trying to get them to stop. So there are times I've seen it where I literally know that I cannot say or do anything because it will cause more harm. And in those moments, I literally stop and say a prayer, because that's all I can do. And I pray and I ask the animals forgiveness for the ignorance of the human relatives. I pray and I ask the universe to either, and this sounds horrible, but to either allow the animal's life to end quickly so that it doesn't have to suffer, or to be able to get away so that it doesn't have to suffer that way. And it's really painful, but I have to be aware that in certain moments, if I were to try and intercede, I would actually cause more harm. And so the best thing I can do is to absorb the pain and then breathe it out through prayer and ask for the animal, and also to ask that that person's mind will be opened in some way. And then sometimes I just try to find a way to model it, that instead of like yelling at a person or telling them to stop, I'll get some breadcrumbs. And when I see a bird in that town, I'll feed the bird breadcrumbs. Or if I see a stray animal, I'll buy food and feed it, because just that act of showing care might educate someone in a way that I could talk to them all I want, and they're just going to do this. They're just be like, la, 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 and it's just going to make them more angry. Whereas if I model the behavior, sometimes it makes people stop and go, oh, because it's never been modeled to them. But it is painful and hard, and that's just the reality of it. And it is important to know what we can truly handle and what we can't. And my honesty is that I can't go into the place that butchers animals. I can't be in that suffering deeply because I feel it too deeply and it'll take me down. And that's why I have to just take ownership. But it doesn't mean I can't do anything. It just means I have to look for how I can contribute in a way that continues to allow me to be healthy, because I want to bring my best self, not my worst self, to these situations.
I understand you very well. Yeah. We also have some scientists, I assume these are your colleagues, Piotrze, who ask questions watching us. Anna Orczewska asks, if you have a fear of heights, and did you feel protected by Luna somehow and united with her when you are up there?
In the beginning, I didn't realize I had a fear of heights until I was about, you all do meters, right? Instead of feet, you do like meters, right? Okay. So I'm trying to like translate it in my brain. About maybe 25 meters or so above the ground, I looked down. And there's a reason why they tell you not to look down. Because when I was just looking at Luna, I was fine. When I looked down, I went, oh, and I panicked and I totally froze. I was like, and then what I literally did was I closed my eyes and, I was using a rope to climb like rock climbers climb, but the redwoods have deep, deep bark. So I swung myself up and grabbed onto the bark because the bark in the redwoods is very deep, very thick. Like bark on redwoods, I'm trying to zoom in, can like be this thick. It's very, very soft and has all these grooves. So I pulled myself in and held onto those grooves and put my head against Luna with my eyes closed. And I said, Luna, you have to help me. And then I imagined my energy going all the way down Luna into her roots. And then I opened my eyes and I kept my eyes just on Luna for the rest of the time because my first platform was 90 meters in the, no, not 90 meters, 183, 60 meters in the air, 180 feet. That's really, really, really high up. And so I just kept focusing on Luna. And one of the neat things was because I was just focusing on Luna, I started seeing all these patterns and faces and things in the bark. Just like if we're laying down in an open field on a day where there's clouds moving through and we see things in the clouds, I started seeing that in Luna. And then that became my world instead of the absolute freezing fear of how far down that ground was. I'm on a rope that's the size of my thumb. There's like the mind says there's no way this is going to hold me. I'm going to break and fall and die. So that was my first experience with Luna helping me with my fear of heights. I continued to have it for a while, so I stayed in my harness whenever I was moving around. But eventually, I did take my shoes off right away, though, because I couldn't feel Luna's communication with my shoes on. So I had to take them off so that I could feel if a branch was really limber and could flex or if it was getting old and rigid and would break. And I couldn't feel that subtle communication with my shoes on. And then eventually, after I had such a strong communication with Luna, I took the harness off, I took the ropes off, and I just free climbed around. But I always told people, don't do that. Because I only did it after I'd spent a lot of time becoming one with Luna. Whereas if you just go up for a day and come down for a day, that connection is very different. So be safe. I wasn't trying to be a show off. It was just that as my connection with Luna grew, the less I felt the need for things to support me. But I never once forgot how high off the ground I was. And that if I made a mistake or I didn't listen to Luna closely enough, I would fall and die. I never forgot that. People would say, oh, you look so comfortable. And I'd be like, well, I'm connected, but I don't know if I'd say comfortable. I'm deeply connected to Luna, but I'm also aware that if we get too comfortable, we take something for granted. And one day, a branch that was flexible has been through too many storms, and I step on it as if it was the same branch 3 days ago, and it breaks, and I fall all the way to the ground and die. So it was a constant process of that communication. And there was literally a day I got to the point where I could climb to the very top of Luna. There was no more branches. I would go to the very, very top. And there was a day that a photographer was planning on coming by in a plane to take a picture for a magazine article. And as I was climbing up, Luna clearly told me, don't go to the top today. And I was like, okay. And I called the guy and I was like, I'm not going all the way to the top. And he's like, but we need that photo for the article. And I said, I know you need it, but Luna told me no. And I said, Luna told me where I can climb to. And so I will climb there and you can still see me, but you're not going to get your iconic shot at me at the top of the tree just because it's going to make you a lot of money and make the article look more interesting, because Luna told me no. So if you want that picture, you're going to have to come on another day. And if you're coming today, this is where I'll be. This is where you can tell the pilot to come to. So it literally would change on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. But I was paying attention to what Luna said.
Thank you. And Zofia Prokop, who is also a scientist, says, thank you, Julia. You have been a huge force of change in my life too. My questions are, how do you guard the balance between outer and inner work with an endless stream of urgent things calling for action? How do you decide how many and which ones you can pick up and which you have to let go so that you don't get depleted? And how do you work with conflicts within the activist communities?
It's an ongoing learning process. It'll probably be something I'm learning for the rest of my life, because I like, for instance, when I did the Luna tree set, I still had a lot of injuries for a young person. I had problems in my hips that were so painful, even getting up the mountain. But now I've been injured so many times that what my body can do is a lot different than what it could do 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. So it's a constantly evolving, changing landscape of that conversation. And in the beginning, it was hard for me. I completely depleted myself. And this is I do life coaching now. And a lot of my coaching really crosses kind of a psychological conversation as well as a coaching conversation, because I see the two connected. And I learned because of myself. So because I was so abused as a child, I put on like this superhero cape, and it was like, Julia's going to save the day for anything and anyone who needs help and is being abused or abandoned or isn't listened to. And so I was always strapping that superhero cape on, but I'm a human being. I'm not a superhero. And so strapping that cape on was detrimental. And so I had to learn how to put that cape down. And the cape is associated with my past. That's the side of me that wants to save everything and everyone because it didn't happen for me. So I had to be aware of, is Julia in the present making this choice, or is Julia from the past with the superhero cape making this choice? Because if it's Julia from the past with the superhero cape, I'm going to deplete myself. I'm going to say yes too many times. I'm going to say yes at a time when I really need to just be taking personal time to nurture my own ecology. But when I got that superhero cape, the only thing that matters is swooping in and saving the day for everything and everyone. The other thing I realized is that because I was strapping on the superhero cape so much, I wasn't demanding that other people step up. People love superheroes because it means they don't have to do anything, or they don't have to do as much. The world, like in the movie, the world is coming in, and don't worry, the superheroes are going to swoop in and they're going to save everyone. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. We all need to be involved. And so I realized, because I was stepping up so much and so often, there was not a call for other people to step up because they didn't need to, because I was going to swoop in and do the work for them. And so like when I realized that, I got to the point, like if a community garden was about to be destroyed or a forest somewhere, and they're like, Julia, we need you to come and help us save this. And I say, well, first we have to have a conversation. I need to know what it is you're doing. What is your strategy? Do you have a strategy? Is your only strategy for me to come in and save it? Because if that's your strategy, this is not the right thing for me to say yes to. So it became an evolution. And sometimes I do better than others because certain things hurt me so deeply that my natural desire, my natural inclination is to act. But I also realized, like, I'm highly oversensitive, as I've mentioned, but I'm also extremely overly opinionated. And so being very sensitive and very opinionated is hard in regular life. And now with social media, it's even worse. So like one of the things I had to do was take myself off of social media because I'm too sensitive and too opinionated. So all these things that people were doing that was hurting me, my superhero self would feel like it needed to step in and say something and correct people and all that stuff. So I'm not on social media anymore because I realized I don't have a way of keeping the superhero cape in the closet when I'm on social media. So I just don't do that anymore. And the other thing that I'm doing now, because I'm older, my energy's less, I'm having to use a lot of my energy for healing. Like I'm currently injured so badly, I can't even walk 10 minutes. That's as far as I can walk before my pain becomes extreme. So I'm actually really physically limited right now. So I also now look, a lot of what I do is about where do I already have relationships or where can the activism build relationships? Because that's what sustains something. So often in activist communities, the reason why they fight is because we're not looking at how to care for one another at the same time as we're caring for the forest or for an animal or to stop a highway going through a nature preserve. We're just focused on that thing and we're not remembering that we matter too. So a lot of my work in the last many years has been about training people as well as creating infrastructure so that if we're going to do an action, equally important is creating relationship with one another. I did an action to try and save a community garden in Los Angeles, in South Central Los Angeles, a very dangerous area in California. It was the largest urban farm in the country. And it is one of the things we lost, which was painful. We've done a lot to do other things since then, but it was a 2-month process of trying to save that community garden. And it was hard because we had farmers who came from other countries who didn't even speak English. We had their representatives who were translators, but if they have an agenda and the farmer has a different agenda, the translation's not always going to be the same. And then we had these really hardcore activists who came in and wanted to wear the black masks and the black hoodies and all of those things. And then I was getting all these celebrities that I knew to get involved because I knew the celebrities would bring media. So we had all these different kinds of people and a lot of conflict started arising because an immigrant farmer who might get caught and sent back to where they come from, even though they haven't lived there for 20 years, their needs are way different than a young activist with a black mask and a black hoodie who is like, F the system, you know, they're all important, but the needs are different. And so in that action, a lot of my work ended up being coming up with ways to build community and trust. So like I would do things like we created a circle and then we all sat down on the knees of the person behind us so that the entire circle holds itself up and you kind of like wobble for a little bit until everybody gets their groundedness. And you have this circle of 30 different people from 30 different walks of life, all resting and relying on the person behind them. And then I would use that as an example for the day to talk about when we come up against our differences, how can we create a system that supports us even though we're different? So those are the kinds of things I try to put my energy towards now when it comes to actions, because building those relationships is what will sustain us, whether we win or whether we fail, whatever's coming next. That's what keeps us healthy as we do the work.
Asha, do we still have questions? Yeah, because it's
yes, but maybe I will choose the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, it's my fault because people ask one question and I give a 10-minute answer. So it's my responsibility. I'm sorry. Because I see the whole picture.
But these answers are so beautiful. So the last one, Paulina Kaczmarek asks, how to become an activist? What is needed according to you?
Well, the first thing I tell people is I don't actually honestly even use the word activist. We, as a species, as a human species, we started creating labels as a way to relate to something and understand it as our communication began to evolve and we started traveling from tribe to tribe and we started interacting. We had to create ways of communicating that connected us from very different places, very different experiences, even as our languages were evolving. But now we've gotten to the point that, like in science, labels are important, of course, because we're trying to understand how to make something new or more effective or how to understand how things relate. But in general conversation, labels usually do more to to distance us and disconnect us than to connect us. You're either an activist or you're not. You're either this gender identity or you're not. You're either, it's like it's an either or what labels do to us now. And so I feel that these words can be problematic because technically every single time we make a choice, we're changing the world. Whether we see it or not, it's impossible not to make a difference. So every choice we make is making a difference, which actually means over 7 billion of us are activists. Whether we realize it or not, we're actively affecting our world. And so instead of, using that word activist, I'm like, the real question is, are we being conscious with our choices or are we being unconscious? Are we looking for how we can be the best we can be, or are we judging and criticizing ourselves and others? Like, that's actually what the conversation is to me. And so the word activist worries me because it then makes everyday people think you're only an activist if you did something like I did, or like the folks there in the forest are doing, or if you lock down to a bulldozer, or you protest in the streets. And all those are forms of activism. But so is thinking about our daily choices and figuring out how can I make the most thoughtful choices I can in my daily life so that I cause the least amount of harm and the most amount of good? How can I reach out into my community and find the best way for me to serve so that I'm making the best positive difference I can make? Whereas activist kinds of makes us think that you have to be a certain way in order to be that. But the truth is over 7 billion of us are that. And with that being said, then for me, the best approach, when a lot of times people will come up to me and say, thank you, Julia, you've inspired me. And I always reply, great. What have I inspired you to do? Because I'm not interested in being responsible for your inspiration as well. I'm already responsible for enough. But if I'm responsible for your inspiration and you're turning that into action, then I'm totally happy with it. But if you're just like, you've inspired me, so I feel better about my life in the world, and now I'm going to go back to doing what I've always done, I don't need that. I don't want that, So I really feel it's important that whatever we choose to do, it's something that we love. It's something that brings energy to us, because what we're dealing with is hard. It's painful, it's depleting, it's frustrating, it's all these things. So if we're not bringing what brings us the most amount of energy and joy to it, we will wear down. We cannot work on everything. It's not possible, but it is possible to see what are my gifts, what are my strengths, what are the things that really have me come alive, even if it's a difficult situation, and find a way and a place to offer that. Because if that's what we were doing, all of us, our world would already be a much better place to be living in.
Thank you, Basia. Rysiek, we are going to finish, but Julia would like to say goodbye to all of us, to Polish people, to Poland, through poems. Julia is going to read another poem for us. At the end, you are part of me. Julia, it's your turn.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you, because everyone who's a part of this, number one, all of you, those of you who are organizing this and asking the questions and doing the sign language and the vocal interpretation, it's all a gift that you're offering to these conversations. And that's so beautiful. And everyone who's been tuning in, asking questions, every single one of us could be doing something else with our time right now. And we all chose to be here in this conversation together. And I find that deeply moving and touching. And so I honestly say thank you, because I feel that time is a sacred gift. It's a sacred resource. So if you are offering our time to something, we're offering a sacred gift, a sacred resource to something. And so that's deeply moving and touching to me on a very real level. So I'm not just saying thank you like, oh yeah, thanks, good night, but like from a heart, a deep heart level, thank you. And with that, I will share this poem, You Are Part of Me. This one also actually came to me after I came down from Luna. I was dealing with a very intense interaction, trying to build relationships between people from very different walks of life. And there was a lot of pointing fingers and arguing and just everyone talking about our differences. And this poem came to me as a result of that. You are part of me, and I am a part of you. When one reaches out to another, then one transforms to two. But two is never, ever separate from the one that it was before. If anything, two is the possibility of one becoming more. And if there were no counting, no more numbers to create a wall, when we looked in the face of one, we would see the face of all.
Great.
Thank you.
Well.
It was a sacred gift for us, Julia, your presence, your voice, your thoughts. It was really great for us. We are proud as a club of ecological thought. We have another fantastic guest during our history. Really, maybe one of the most, how to say, spiritual person, yeah?
But definitely to move me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Julia. It was a great conversation, poems and song and film. And I am really impressed of your message. Very deep, very spiritual, very balanced. I mean, outer and inner world. It's a great lesson for us, for activists, for other people, for everyday life. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Julia, you will stay with us on Facebook, on YouTube. I'm sure that many people will join, will see this our conversation and you in the future. So you will stay in Poland now. It was great experience for us. It's a pity that we should end, but we will see what will future bring to us.
That's right.
I hope that it is not the last conversation between us. Maybe will be another possibility, because as you need the earth, nature needs us.
Yes. Yeah.
All of us.
Yes. Well, it's been lovely to connect with you all. It's so nice when we make these connections where there's, even with something like language differences, the language of the heart is international. You know, it's beyond nations. And there was actually, it reminds me, there was this time when they had put me under siege and they were trying to starve me down, and they were also blowing very, very, very loud air horns all night and all day, so I couldn't sleep, to try and get me to come down because I had no sleep for 8 days. And whenever they'd start saying really awful things or doing awful things, I remembered this chorus from a song when I was a child, and I would just sing it at the top of my lungs, even though I'm not a good singer. I would just sing it at the top of my lungs. And the words are, love in any language, straight from the heart, pulls us all together and never apart. And once we learn to speak it, all the world will hear that love in any language is fluently spoken here. And so that's what it felt like for me with you all today, that the love communication happened like that. And I'm just so grateful. So I know that's a part of who you are, not just what you do. So like, I'm getting goosebumps. You all gave me energy today. So thank you.
Thank you for your energy to us.
Yeah.
To us,
thank you very much.
Polish activist. Goodbye, Julia. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Take good care. I'll take you with me in my heart.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.